It was just a regular Monday morning when Sarah Jackson opened the envelope that would turn her world upside down. She had a feeling something wasn't quite right when she saw the thick paper, but she never expected the eviction notice that followed. The Jacksons, a hardworking family who had been renting a house for years, had always kept up with their payments. They were just another family trying to make a life in their small, tight-knit neighborhood. But what they didn't know was that their lives were about to be ripped apart. The landlord, Mr. Thompson, had always been cold to them, but the eviction notice seemed to come out of nowhere. No warning, no reason, just a short, heartless letter telling them they were being evicted. Sarah's hands trembled as she read the words, and she couldn't believe it. She went straight to her husband, Marcus, who had just come home from his night shift, and handed him the letter. "Marcus? Look," Sarah said, her voice shaking. "They're kicking us out. We have to leave by the end of the month." Marcus took the letter and read it in disbelief. He had worked tirelessly for years to provide for his family. He worked long hours as a truck driver, and every paycheck had gone into making sure their bills were paid. They had never missed a rent payment, never caused trouble. Yet here they were, being thrown out for no reason at all. The confusion quickly turned to anger as he paced back and forth. "This doesn't make sense," he muttered. "We've done everything right. This isn't fair." Sarah tried to stay calm, but inside she was panicking. Where would they go? They didn't have the money to move into another place on such short notice. They had 2 kids, and their oldest daughter, Mia, had just started high school. She couldn't imagine uprooting her children from everything they knew. Over the next few days, they tried reaching out to Mr. Thompson. They sent emails, made phone calls, but no one answered. When they finally went to his office, he was nowhere to be found. The more they tried to communicate, the more distant and unhelpful he became. Eventually, they found out through a neighbor that Mr. Thompson had been talking about selling the house and that he had already found a buyer. It didn't surprise them. It seemed like he wanted to get rid of the property as quickly as possible. But they didn't expect what was coming next. The Jacksons had already started packing, unsure of where they would go. The kids were confused and scared, and Sarah was trying to put on a brave face, but deep down, she felt like everything was falling apart. They had no choice but to leave, as Mr. Thompson refused to let them stay. His behavior had become increasingly cold, and Sarah began to suspect it was something more than just business. It was personal. She didn't know if it was racism or simple cruelty. But the way he treated them felt like more than just a bad landlord. He had made it clear they weren't welcome, and his actions spoke louder than his words. Then, just as they were about to give up hope, they got a call about the new owner. The new owner of the property was a woman named Sarah Matthews, a successful businesswoman who had recently purchased the house from Mr. Thompson. The Jacksons didn't know what to expect, but they were hoping for a fresh start. They didn't know much about Sarah Matthews, but they knew she had the power to change everything. The day the new owner arrived was the day the entire situation took a turn. The Jacksons had spent the morning packing up their remaining belongings, unsure of how much more they could carry. Their suitcases sat by the door, and their eyes were heavy with exhaustion. They had been through so much in such a short time, but there was a sense of relief in knowing that they were finally going to leave the house that had been the source of so much pain. As Sarah Matthews stepped out of her car and walked toward them, the Jacksons stood there, waiting for what felt like an inevitable confrontation. But when she smiled and introduced herself, everything changed. There was warmth in her eyes, kindness in her voice, and she didn't look at them the way Mr. Thompson had. She didn't judge them or make them feel small. She saw them as human beings, not as an inconvenience. "Hello, I'm Sarah Matthews," she said, extending her hand. "I'm the new owner of this property. I'm not going to let you leave." The Jacksons blinked in surprise. They had expected a cold, dismissive interaction. After all, they had been through so much already. But this was different. This woman didn't seem to care about race, about status, about anything other than doing the right thing. "I'm here to help," Sarah said. "I'm not going to let you be treated this way. I don't care what Mr. Thompson did. You have a place to stay." Tears welled up in Sarah Jackson's eyes as she processed what was happening. For the first time in days, she felt a wave of hope wash over her. She didn't have to fight anymore. She didn't have to scramble for a place to live. This woman was giving them a second chance. Sarah Matthews wasn't just any new owner. She was a person who believed in standing up for what was right. She could have easily let the Jacksons go, just as Mr. Thompson had wanted. But she chose not to. She wasn't going to be like him. She was better than that. As Marcus stood there, still in disbelief, Sarah Matthews turned to Mr. Thompson, who had shown up shortly after. "This isn't your house anymore," she said calmly but firmly. "Your behavior has been unacceptable, and I'm not going to allow you to treat people this way." Mr. Thompson tried to argue, but it was clear he had no power here. He was shocked by Sarah Matthews' words, and it seemed that for the first time, he was the one who felt out of place. He tried to push back, but Sarah Matthews wasn't having it. She stood her ground, and with every word, she showed the Jacksons that not all people are like Mr. Thompson. Not everyone would judge them based on their race or look down on them. "Get out," Sarah Matthews said, her voice resolute. "This property is mine now, and I will not let you mistreat anyone." Mr. Thompson had no choice but to leave. The Jacksons, still in awe, watched as the man who had evicted them was escorted off the property. They were finally free from his cruelty. From that moment on, Sarah Matthews made sure the Jacksons stayed. She gave them a chance to get back on their feet and offered them a future in the house they had once feared losing. She didn't care about anything other than doing what was right, and that was the kind of person she was. As Sarah Matthews walked away, Sarah Jackson turned to her family with tears in her eyes. For the first time in weeks, they could finally breathe again. They weren't being judged for who they were. They had found someone who saw their worth. And as they stood in front of their home, a place that had once felt like a prison, they realized that this was just the beginning of a new chapter. A chapter where kindness and compassion would win out over hatred and cruelty. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch this story. We hope it inspired you and brought a little more kindness and hope into your day. If you found value in it, please hit the like button. It really helps us reach more people who need to hear these messages. And if you think someone else could benefit from this story, don't hesitate to share it with your friends, family, or on your social media. It could make all the difference. If you haven't already, be sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you'll be the first to know when we upload more powerful stories like this one. We're always striving to bring you content that uplifts and motivates, and your support helps us keep doing that. We'd also love to hear what you think. Drop a comment below and let us know how you felt about the story, or if you have any thoughts or feedback to share. We read every comment and truly appreciate your input. Thanks again for being part of our community. Your support means the world to us.